I'm Francis Robinson. My field is, or my research field, is the history of the Muslim world, in particular religious change in the Muslim world from the 18th century to the present. This means I've done, in fact, a lot of research over the past 40 years. I started in the late 1960s, working in particular on the private papers of families of learned and holy men. That's ulama, who are essentially learned men, and Sufis, who are Islamic mystics. One of the things that this enabled me to do was to understand the transmission of knowledge in the Muslim world, all the way from the time of the Prophet down to the present. It also gave me tremendous insights into the way in which learned and holy men used their knowledge on earth in order to bring Islam, or their faith, alive. More particularly, it's given me particular insights into the Islamic revival, of which we're much concerned with now. An Islamic revival which began primarily in the 18th century with two great starting points, one in what's now Saudi Arabia and the other in India, and which has moved throughout the Islamic world from those two starting points and still has a huge impact actually on what takes place in the Islamic world. And so if one has this kind of understanding, one can understand, for instance, how there was an Islamic revolution in Iran in 1978-79. One can understand how a so-called Islamist party came to power in Turkey about 10 years ago. One got lots of insights into what's called the Arab Spring, which we've been very aware of in recent years, and so on. Now, of course, this work feeds into my publishing, and some of the books I've published, for instance, I published actually 31 years ago, something called an Atlas of the Islamic World since 1500. And it was much more than an atlas. It had lots of lovely pictures, as well as maps, but it also had 100,000 words of text. And the basic structure for this was to show how you could understand Islamic history, or Muslim history, by understanding the interaction between ulama and Sufis, these people I've been spending a lot of my time studying, and the societies in which they moved, and the wielders of power in the societies in which they moved. And this, in fact, is a very good way of understanding how Islamic history has unfolded from the 7th century to the present. Now, of course, I bring this into my teaching. One course that I teach is entitled The Islamic Revival. And in fact, the very particular insights of my research feed into almost everything that I teach in the context of the Islamic revival. I also teach a rather broader course called World History in the 20th Century. And of course, this again gives me an opportunity to bring the Islamic revival and the way in which it's affected a wide range of people, from people in the Middle East, through people in South Asia, through people in West Africa, how it's affected the way in which politics has turned out, how societies have changed, and how individual lives have been formed. And one of the things I'm particularly concerned to do in all my teaching is to enable people to come to grips with the humanity of the people that we're studying, whether they existed 1,500 years ago or whether it was about 10 or 20 years ago.